This episode gave us massive amount of information, but after rewatching it several times, I started to notice details that completely flew under my radar the first time around. This video contains spoilers for From Season 4, Episode 7. One of the biggest things I've noticed was a strange circular wheel-like design that appears in the episode. Somehow, I've never paid much attention to it before. When you look closely, you can clearly see the imagery that resembles the sun and the moon surrounded what appears to be 6 houses. What's interesting is that we've also seen similar sun and moon imagery in Victor's drawings throughout the series. That got me thinking, what if a solar eclipse or a lunar eclipse going to play a major role in the mystery of From? The more I examine the clues, the more I notice recurring symbols connected to the sun, moon, circles, wheels, and even the infinity light patterns. The talismans themselves appear to contain both the sun and the moon imagery. We see circular cave drawings, maps, carvings, and symbols that continue to repeat throughout the show. I don't think that's accidental. What makes this theory even more interesting is the symbolism behind an eclipse. An eclipse represents the meaning of light and darkness. That concept fits perfectly with the central themes of From and the ongoing struggle between opposing forces that seem to control the town. Now, I could be completely wrong here, but I don't believe the writers have been placing these symbols throughout multiple seasons by coincidence. It feels like they've been planting these clues from the very beginning, and a solar or lunar eclipse may ultimately be the key of understanding what's really happening. If that's true, it could mean that the cycle we've been hearing about is getting ready to end. Speaking of the man in yellow, Victor tells Boy if the man in yellow is back, which implies that this has happened before. If the man in yellow has returned, then history may be repeating itself. I believe that he was the mastermind behind the original massacre. He orchestrated the events to make the townspeople vulnerable and easier to manipulate. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I think there's still a mole in the town. Someone made a bargain. Someone is helping him. Whether they realize it or not remains to be seen. One thing this episode seems to confirm is that not everyone has been reincarnated. Right now, the evidence points specifically towards Tabitha and Jade. However, I think Jade may have accidentally revealed something important when he spoke with Randall. He suggests that some of the townspeople may have heard children calling to them but never realized it. Think about that for a moment. We've seen several characters hear strange nursery rhymes. Others have encountered the boy in white. Some receive visions, dreams, or messages that seem completely random. What if they weren't random at all? What if the children have been reaching out to multiple people this entire time? The more I think about it, the more From starts reminding me of the Stephen King's The Stand. And before anyone says I'm reaching, remember that many of the people behind From are huge fans of Stephen King's work. Some of the writers and directors even worked on Mr. Mercedes, the Dark Tower movie, and Under the Dome series, another King adaptation. If you compare the two stories of From and The Stand, there are some surprising similarities. At its core, I've always believed From is about the battle between good and evil. Back in season 1, I mentioned this as a theory. Now I'm convinced. In The Stand, you have Mother Abigail representing hope, faith, and guidance. On the opposite side, you have Randall Flagg, a manipulative force of chaos and destruction. What if the boy in white serves a role similar to Mother Abigail? He appears in dreams, he appears in visions, he guides people, he asks for help. Now compare that to the man in yellow. The man in yellow manipulates people, he makes bargains, he influences minds, he tempts individuals into making terrible decisions. That sounds a lot like Randall Flagg. For those unfamiliar with the character, Randall Flagg is often described as a powerful sorcerer and a servant. I think the writers are taking inspiration from King's work and transforming those ideas into their own mythology. If that's the case, season 5 could become incredibly dangerous. We may see major characters' death, we may see entirely a new group of people arrive, and most importantly, we may discover that the cycle never truly ends. Maybe nobody ever escapes, maybe the story simple resets. And honestly, that possibility reminds me of another Stephen King masterpiece called the Dark Tower series. I'm talking about the book, not the movie. Now let's talk about Boyd. Boyd tell Acosta to put together a team to find everything they can about the man in yellow. And I completely agree with that decision. There has to be more evidence somewhere. A photograph, a document, a newspaper clipping, something connect to Sophia or the man in yellow. There has to be more than just a yellow suit. There has to be clues hidden somewhere in the town's history. Boyd also has a conversation with Donna, and I have to be honest, I was a little bit frustrated. Why is Roger's body still sitting in the shed? Realistically, it would have been removed or burned immediately. Sometimes the priorities of these characters make absolutely no sense to me. But speaking of that location, let's discuss the red door. In horror stories, red doors often symbolize forbidden knowledge, psychological trauma, danger, or a gateway into the supernatural. They're warning signs. They tell both the audience and the characters that something terrible exists beyond them. For example, the tunnels is where the monsters live. Now let's move on to Henry. I think we finally understand what is happening to him. Henry is beginning to see things that aren't really there. And suddenly his earlier hospital scene makes a lot more sense. The Victor we see in those visions isn't the Victor from the town. He's different. He's wearing a suit. He's calmer. He's almost presented in an alternate reality. I think the man in yellow implement a false memory into Henry's mind. And that memory, the hospital is real, the town is fake. The hospital represents hope. The town represents the dream. The goal is simple: convince Henry to stay where he is and a possibility to do self-destruction to the town, just like what Abby did. Then we have Sophia, one of the strangest scenes involving her searching for a rotten egg. A first glimpse that seems random, but eggs have deep symbolic meaning in folklore, witchcraft, and ritual traditions. Throughout history, eggs have been used for cleansing rituals, protection, blessing, curses, divination, and spiritual work. In this particular scene, I believe the symbolism points towards a curse. And shortly after, Roger wakes up. We also finally get a clearer connection between Fatima and Smiley. Fatima appears capable of seeing through Smiley's perspective and may even possess some level of influence over him. At first, that sounds like an advantage, but I think it's actually dangerous. The monsters are intelligent, far more intelligent than more people realize. If Fatima continues to strengthen that connection, it could eventually work against her. And that brings me to my final theory. I think we're witnessing the forces of creation and destruction colliding. That's why we continue seeing mythology. That's why we see folklore. That's why we see witchcraft symbolism. That's why we see the biblical references. Everything appears to connect back to the boy in white and the man in yellow. If the man in yellow has truly existed for centuries, possibly long before the 1600s, then he will possess knowledge of countless belief systems, rituals, myths, legends, and also witchcraft symbolism. He would know every trick, every bargain, every manipulation, every story, because he has seen them all before. And maybe that's the real secret of From. The town isn't just a person, it's a battlefield. A battlefield between light and darkness, a battlefield between hope and despair, a battlefield between the boy in white and the man in yellow.
Fighting a battle they knew they couldn't win. He said they were holding on to hope.
But that's just my theory. What do you think? Do you believe an eclipse is coming? Do you think the man in yellow is From's version of Randall Flagg? And who do you think is secretly helping him inside the town? Let me know your theories in the comments below. If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and become an Innkeeper member for exclusive content. And as always, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.